Welcome in, y'all. Timeshare Clarence. Today, I don't necessarily have any advice. Just want to kind of talk about something that's been on my mind recently. I think the term generational curses is pretty big right now. It's something that is on a lot of people's minds. And it's something I've been thinking about myself quite often recently. And the reality is, in my family, I feel like first off, I don't feel like it's a curse, right? I just feel like it's negative training and conditioning. Um, People do what they're taught and conditioned to do, and people think the way that they're taught and conditioned to think until they have a reason to change that. So for me, I've made a lot of changes, and I continue to try to identify changes that I need to make from just how I was raised and the things that I was taught to do, the things that I was taught to believe. So I definitely can't talk about all of them, but I do want to talk about violence within the household, within the family, and why I don't believe it makes a lot of sense. So, the majority of my life, I felt like a lot of people in my family have always kind of pointed out how Black people raise their kids differently than other races. And a lot of these things were very evident. But I think one of the biggest things was, hitting your kids. And when I was young, I was a little bit crazy. I still am. But when I was young, I used to justify my parents whooping me because I used to just try to make sense out of everything. And I was like, well, if they wouldn't whoop me or if I wasn't scared of getting a whooping, then like I wouldn't listen. Cause like I'm only grounded. I'm only gonna stay in a room because I'm scared of getting a whooping. Like if there was no fear of getting hit, like what's the consequence? You could tell me to stay in the room, but if I don't stay in the room, what you gonna do? So I used to justify it myself. And I had a conversation with Aaliyah a couple years ago, maybe. Um, and she was talking about generational curses and parents hitting their children and how, like, why would you want to hurt somebody that you care about? Like, if the goal is actually to do what's in this child's best interest and to teach this child, you know, the right way to live, and you want the best for them, like where is trying to hurt them really justifying that or supporting that that's your intentions? Because it just doesn't make sense. And I listened to her and I thought about it, and it doesn't make sense to me either. I know a lot of people do things and they don't think about why they do it, but I realize with looking at my family, and I don't want to make this too long, so I'm just go through a little brief history. Like from a very young age, it's just like violence was the standard. Um, Ironically, a story I've heard over and over and over from my grandma and my mom was that when I was born, when my grandma first saw me, this is my mom's mom, Teresa. So when my grandma first saw me, the first thing she said was basically she needed to go get me out of there and beat me because I look like my grandfather. Because like so background, my grandfather spent the majority of his life and almost the entirety of my life in prison for murder. And I love my grandfather. Um, I really only got to spend time with him one time outside of prison. And I think that was really beneficial for both of us because I think my grandfather didn't understand how much I cared about him. I just wasn't going to go to prison. Like, I visited him in prison my entire life. My mom took us so that we would know her dad. And but he talked to me and everybody else talked to me about the situation. And the takeaway was, you know, it was an altercation between him and another dude, and it just kind of bubbled over. And my grandfather thought the dude was going to try to harm him, so he shot him. And it's, again, I don't want to try to tell the details of the story, but that's the gist of it. So my grandfather spent the majority of his life in prison. So back to my grandma. So I feel like that was her reason for saying that. That was the correlation. Like, I look angry. And my entire life, people tell me I look mean, which is why I try to smile a lot now. Because before I never would smile, so that would make it worse. Because like I do kind of have a mean mug. So anyway, like that's the story I get told about when I was born, that the first thing that came to my grandma's mind was she basically needed to beat the Jerry Jackson out of me. Uh, and she ain't have to, but the point was taken. Like, it wasn't to hurt me, and I never perceived it that way. It was like the lesson, like being angry, having a short temper can cost you your freedom. And that's not what they wanted for me. Now, um, according to my brother and sister, I never got whoopings growing up. But I got a couple. And I can't really remember all of the ones I got because none of them really mattered except the ones I felt I didn't deserve. And I'm 41 years old and I still remember that. It was two times, only two times, I felt like I got whoopings and it wasn't justified. That's why I don't remember none of the other times, but I know I got more than two whoopings. Um, so one time I forgot to take out the trash, and I was probably in fifth or sixth grade at this time, and I just couldn't remember what I was supposed to do. Now this in the 90s, so we didn't have cell phones. It wasn't like I was up, my mom was gone, I was sleepy. It's like 6 a.m. It's dark outside because you got to take the trash out. So I got fully dressed, and most people have done this before, like walk into a room looking for something and forget like what you even went in there for. So like I've got up, I got dressed, and I'm like what am I supposed to be doing? I couldn't remember. So I didn't take the trash out. So that's one of the times. And then the other time, my uncle stole, well, I mean, I guess it's stealing, but my uncle took some cookies out the cookie jar and then lied about it, and I got blamed for it. So, yeah, but I never really tripped off getting whoopings. I never felt like it was abuse. I never felt like it didn't make sense because, I mean, that's how I was conditioned. I had a lot of conversations with my dad about trying to be a better father to my kids, and he never had any good advice. His advice was always the same thing: you need to beat their ass. And I'd be like, yo, that is not the solution. I try a lot of different stuff, and I still don't really know what's the most effective thing, which is why I'm doing this, because this will be there for my kids. So whatever work, like it'll be enough stuff out there for them to take what they want to take from it. So I started really thinking about not just my grandfather, but just like this is something that is just passed down from generation to generation to generation. Like just to be taught that the solution is to hit somebody to teach them a lesson versus actually make sure they understand and had an opportunity to process and choose and what, because that's when it's really most effective. Like people, you can never force people to do or be anything. And if you do force people, especially with violence, then at some point, like they're gonna be too big for you to whoop them. And then that's what typically happens in our, I'll say my family. I feel like throughout the community, because that's what I hear the vast majority of the time. And I think that's really sad. Now, what's the solution? Honestly, I don't know. I feel like if somebody figured out parenting, hey, kudos, because it's complicated because all the kids different, all the circumstances different, and to be frank, the world is different. This is not the world I grew up in. And I grew up partially sheltered with my mom and then kind of just on my own with my dad. I bounced around from place to place. I was in St. Louis for a few years. Then we moved to Michigan, but we moved to Portland, Michigan. And that was a couple years. And then we moved to Lansing, and I was in Lansing for a few years. And I was in Jackson for a few years. And then I was in St. Louis for a few years. And then I was in Kansas for almost a year and just bounced around. So said that to say this, like I didn't have a lot of training on like life, more so I feel like survival. So I mean, I tried to listen to what I was told. Um, I don't. My grandfather never, and that's the funny thing. That's why I know you don't need to. You don't need to hit people. You don't. A lot of people never understood my relationship with my grandfather because they thought he was mean to me. But my grandfather did the one thing that he needed to do. He talked to me and he allowed me to talk back, not disrespectfully, but we had real conversations where I at least got to voice my opinion. And because we did that, I would always think about what my grandfather told me. And I learned a lot better from having conversations than getting whoopings, because whatever them lessons was, I don't remember none of them whoopings except the ones I felt like I didn't deserve. So if they were to teach me lessons, then obviously it didn't stick. But I remember all these conversations with my grandfather where he was explaining simple stuff to me. So that's like my perspective, but I still was taught to do that. So early on, I mean, I did that. I think most people I know still do that. I definitely have no desire to. So I try to find other ways. But ultimately, I don't think that it is effective. I think it gets assigned more responsibility than it is warranted. I think people, because they survived abuse like I did, justify it. So then they say it made them. It didn't really make you. Like you survived whatever. And, you know, the lessons have an impact, but it didn't need to be presented that way or taught that way or inflicted or however you want to deem it. So I think the reason that is so prevalent in our community is because that's what we were taught. People are ultra dismissive of history. I can't go back beyond my grandparents, like especially the men. Like I don't know who my mom's dad was, you know. I do know my great, I do, or at least knew who he was when I was young. My great grandfather on my mom's side, my grandmom's dad, um, on my dad's side, I knew my grandma's dad, but like we didn't have no relationship when I was growing up, but I had to take care of him when I was a teenager. And I have no clue who my dad's dad was, right? And then it's a lot of that. But I feel like it goes hand in hand because along with the violence, the I guess I don't want to say inception, but I really like that's how I feel like it was a seed that was planted. It all came from, in my opinion, slavery. Like that's what black people were taught was the system of control, was violence. And then it got perpetrated on us, our ancestors, in slavery. And then instead of going against it, we bought into it and then have passed these things down that were designed to destroy our families, to corrupt our minds. And when I say corrupt our minds, I mean it's the difference between a prisoner and a slave. So you can imprison somebody physically. I can take your freedom. They can throw me in prison. They can throw me in jail. They can put me in cuffs, but they can't make me a slave. Like, and it's not knocking the people that suffered through that, but like that's the reality. It has to be something that you accept. So to get people to accept it, then they were brutal. And then that's what was taught to black people. And that's what black people that I've seen in my experience have done. And, you hurt the people you care the most about because you want the best for them. And that to me just doesn't make any sense. It's a better way. And I really hope that that changes in my family and my community, because I try to keep up with the people that are important to me and my kids, my nephews, nieces, and let them know how much I care about them and I love them. Like, what part of slapping somebody in the face communicates love? What part of beating somebody with an extension cord communicates love? Or a shredded piece of tire, like a tractor tire, you know, or a whole group of adults like taking turns beating on a kid because they did some kid stuff. Like, now they'll remember that the entire life. Probably tell stories and not even realize how messed up it is. And I just can't really support that because it just doesn't make sense. And that's really all I'm trying to do, is make life make sense. Made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of bad choices, a lot of stuff out of ignorance, some stuff out of, stubbornness, closed-mindedness, all these things that I strive to change to become the person that I desire to be the example that I want to be for the people that I care the most about, and have the influence and impact that I want to have on those same people to provide them with an extraordinary life, and not only provide them with it, but share it with them. And I don't want violence to be a part of that picture. And I would hope that whoever would listen to this would at least consider that it might not be the best thing to be incorporated in your family life, your household, or any other situation, because it rarely solves anything. So yeah, I just had that on my mind. Like, that's one thing, violence, that I feel like is passed down in black families. And I hope that it stops. So that's all I got for y'all today. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. Timeshare Clarence. Until next time, peace.